I'm going to pick up right where we left off, I think, was with parabolas. So quick review here. I'm going to just put these into their vertex form by completing the square, because we're going to use this a little later in this lesson also. So if I want to complete the square, my first step is to isolate my variables on the left side, and I'm going to move all constants to the right side. So when I move this over, I'm going to say plus 4 here and plus 4 here. So I have now x squared plus 12x equal to 9 plus 4, which is 13. So this is what I'm going to be working with. Alright, so we need to add our b over 2 squared to each side. So I'm going to leave a space there. That's going to be my b over 2 squared. And whatever I do to the left side, I have to also do to the right side. So b over 2, remember this is a, b, c. So my b in this case is 12. So I need to find what I'm going to be adding. So I'm going to be adding 12 over 2 squared. 12 over 2 is 6. And so 6 squared. So I'm going to be adding 36 to each side. So I'm adding 36 here, I'm adding 36 here. On this side then, I'm going to factor. So over here, here's our little organizer. A times c is 36. B is 12, and I'm looking for factors of 36 that will multiply. Give me 36, and I can also add them and get 12. So that's going to be 6 times 6, and you will always have the same numbers here, same sign and everything. So when I factor this, I get x plus 6 times x plus 6. And that's that factored now. And I'm going to simplify right here, so that's going to give me 49 is equal to 49. So I can rewrite this as x plus 6 squared equal to 49. And then a vertex form means that this is my k value, and it's going to move to the other side and set equal to 0, so that it's in a form where I can graph it. So x plus 6 squared minus 49 is equal to 0 is what that would become. And so my vertex point for this is going to be negative 6. If it's in parentheses, it changes its sign. If it's outside of parentheses, it doesn't. Negative 6, negative 49 will be my vertex point, because my vertex is h and k here. And this is my a, x minus h squared plus k form right here. When my a value is not 1, I'm going to make it 1, and so we'll see when we get into circles how we can do something a little bit different. For this one, every part of this is divisible by 5, so I can actually just clear out my 5 completely here. If it didn't divide evenly into everything, then I would not want to do this, and we'll see that shortly. So that I have x squared plus 4x plus 2 is equal to a negative 1. I'm going to follow that same step above, so I've got x squared plus 4x. I'm going to go ahead and leave space here for b over 2 squared equals, and I will move this over, so I get negative 3 plus my b over 2 squared. So here's my b, 4. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 squared is 4, so I'm adding 4 to each side. So when I factor this, I'm going to get x plus 2 twice is equal to negative 3 plus 4 is 1. So, and then I'm going to move that over. X plus 2 squared minus 1 equals 0. There's my vertex form, and my vertex point would then be at negative 2, negative 1. Because this is going to come up later. We're going to practice completing the square for circles. Okay, so conic sections 2. First conic section was parabolas, and just so you remember, and we already quizzed over this, that if I cut through a cone and cut through its base, I can produce my parabola shape. And I could do that at a lot of different angles, but it has to go through the base to get your parabola shape. To create a circle, I cut through my cone, and it has to be absolutely parallel to the base, because a cone has a base that has a circle shape. And so anywhere that I cut across this, as long as it's parallel to the base, I'm going to get another circle. So that is the cut on the cone that will produce my circle. So our content objective here is to be able to sketch graphs of circles and relate to the parameter changes h and k to the equation and to the changes in the graph, and to be able to use the vocabulary that we're discussing in this lesson correctly. And some vocabulary familiar to you, what we're looking at is center, radius, and diameter. And our essential question is to be able to explain how a circle is formed by intersecting a plane and a cone, and that's what we just discussed right here, is that it has to be parallel. So that's the essential question that you need to remember for this lesson. Right, in the pages that you were given, find this area right here, and we're going to fill in, and then we're going to do a few practice together, and then I'm going to leave the rest for you to do on your own. The equation for a circle that is centered at hk. So hk will come up again and again all the way through this with a radius of r. Right, and I'm going to write down two different forms that we'll use, and as we complete the square I'll show you both methods, just because when we get into our ellipses and hyperbolas, then it won't be such a hard stretch for you. So first of all, here is our working, or we'll call it our standard form, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And that would be a circle with a radius. So we would take the square root of this to get our radius. The other way we're going to look at this is as x minus h squared over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared equal to 1. And in this particular situation, a and b will be the same number for it to be a circle. And you'll see with ellipses and hyperbolas that a and b in those cases are not necessarily the same number. So we'll start out right here. We're going to just find the center, find the radius from the graph, and write an equation. And for this I'm going to just be writing the equation in its standard form here, equal to r squared. So the center would be at 1, negative 2. So this is h, this is k. And I find the radius by just counting units here. It is 3 units from the center to the outside of the circle. So that is my r. And so from there we're just substituting in numbers right here to write our equation. So I have x minus, and remember, just like it always has been, h is going to change its sign. So if it was a positive 1 here, I'm going to put x minus 1 squared plus y minus k. So you can either put minus a negative 2, or you can put y plus 2. And we're most likely going to see it as y plus 2. So we'll go ahead and do that. Is equal to the radius squared, so 3 squared, which is 9. And then we have something here then that we could graph on our calculators. The circle here is at negative 2, 1. So again, I have my h and my k. The radius of this one, if I count from the center out to the edge of the circle, is 4 units. So my equation here would say x minus a negative 2, which becomes x plus 2 squared, plus y minus 1 squared, which would equal 4 squared, which is 16. And so that would be an equation that we could graph. I'm going to go ahead and bring our calculator up so we can look at some graphs in just a minute. Alright, and then this example, our center is at 0, 0 here, so I want to show you how we write that a little bit differently. So that's h and k, and our radius is going to again be out to the edge, so our radius here is 6 units. So if your h is 0, so we could write x minus 0 squared, and you'll see in the calculator when you actually do the graphing using the template you have to do this, but you're not actually going to see it written that way most times. So I want to make you aware of what you will see, and that is that when your h is a 0, you don't have to write it down. So we could see something like this, just x squared, and then my k is also 0, so y squared is equal to 6 squared, which is 36. And so that's how you would see this equation written on the calculator. Okay, we're going to go to graph page, new document, and we're going to change the way we enter this. So we're going to go graph entry edit, equation, and we are entering a circle. And so you had two options there. This is the template we're using. So this is where I was saying you have to put x minus 0 in the calculator. So right here I can put 0, x minus 0 squared, y minus 0 squared, and then I'm not going to put 36 here because that would be a much larger number than what I'm looking for. I'm going to put the r squared, so 6 squared right here, and enter, and then we can draw our graph, and then we'll look in a later lesson at where we can actually go through, we can analyze our conics, and we can find a lot of these different parts here as well. So we'll come back to that later. The other thing we want to look at is how to graph the circle itself, and I can guarantee you this is not going to be a very pretty circle writing on this tablet. But if we're given an equation, then this is my h and this is my k, and again I have to remember that when they were put into the parentheses, their sign changed. So when I pull them back out of the parentheses, the sign is going to change again. So this is, the center is actually a positive 3, negative 2. And so I'm going to graph positive 3, negative 2. There is the center of my circle. The radius is going to be the square root of whatever number is here. So the square root of 25, which is 5. So from my center, I'm just going to come out 5 units in all directions. And then I'm going to go ahead and write down the coordinates of this. So this is at, I think that's at 8, negative 2. And then at 3, 3, we have a point at negative 2, negative 2. And then at 3, I think that's negative 7. Okay, and then we're going to try to make this look kind of circular. Yours will be better than mine. I could do this better on the smartboard itself, but on this tablet it's kind of difficult to get it to go where you want it to. But you get the idea that this shouldn't be looking like a square, it should be circular in shape here. Alright, so right from right there, the page you have on graphing circles, then you should be able to complete the rest of those problems. There are some problems that require a little bit of thought, like they might give you the points up here and points here and then ask you to find the center from that, so that's going to just think those through. You have all the information you need on that. Let me go ahead and put up here, in case you need, I think there might be one problem that you need the distance formula for. And so distance is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1, and so in this case they've given you 2 points squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So there's your distance formula, And then if you need the midpoint formula to find the x value, you're going to do your x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and then to find the y value of your point, you're going to do the y value. So you're finding the average, basically, of the 2 points for your midpoint formula. Right, the other thing we're going to look at is completing the square for circles. So what we did at the very beginning of this lesson and what we had already practiced with parabolas, for completing the square, we're doing that same thing except that we now have x squared terms and y squared terms, so we're going to do it twice in the same problem. And so this is kind of what it's going to look like. I'm going to work problems with you. But first thing we're going to do is get all of our x terms together on the left, all of our y terms together on the left, and still move our constants all over to the right side, just like we were. Then we're going to do our b over 2 squared here, and so then we have to add that here also. And then we do it again here. Now it's not the same b over 2 squared each time, because this b right here is the one you'll use with the x's, and this b is the one you'll use with the y's. So they're different numbers. Then we're going to factor. And then once we have it in this form, we can tell our center, because this will be our h right here, and this will be our k, and it'll be set equal to r squared, so we can find the center hk, and we can find the radius, square root of r squared up there. Okay, so we're going to work through some example problems together here. Alright, so starting right here, see if I can fit all this in here. The first thing I'm going to do is get my terms together. So I have x squared and minus 4x. Now I did not change the sign of that because it was already on the left side. I didn't have to bring it over here. And I'm going to go ahead and right here leave some room for my b over 2 squared. And I should start that much further over if I'm going to do this. So x squared minus 4x plus my b over 2 squared. So this is all going to go together. Plus, and I'm going to put my y's together, y squared minus 6y. Same thing here, I didn't move anything really yet. I'm just kind of moving them around on the same side. And that's all going to go together. Equals. Now here, I am moving that to the other side, so the sign has changed. So it's positive 51 now. And I'm going to add here. So I'm going to keep everything balanced by adding both sides. Okay, so the number that we're putting in here, the formula is use b over 2 squared. So my b in this case is negative 4. So negative 4 divided by 2 squared is going to give me a positive 4. It will always be positive because you can't square a term and get a negative out of it. Right here, I'm going to use this b, which is negative 6 over 2 squared, which is going to give me 9. 3 squared, negative 3 squared. Okay, so I have my b over 2 squared on each side. I am going to factor this side first, and this is all x terms. A times c is 4, b is negative 4, so the numbers that work here are negative 2 and negative 2. So I get x minus 2 twice, right there. I'm going to factor this one. And so a times c is 9, b is negative 6. So my numbers here are negative 3 and negative 3. So I've got y minus 3 twice. Equals, and then let's combine terms here, so that's 13 plus 51. It's going to give me 64 right here. So this is the standard form. And so from here, I can tell the center and the radius. My center is 2, 3. My radius is the square root of 64, which is 8. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and transform this into the other form that we can use sometimes. I'm not going to do this on every one, but just to show you here, that I could set this equal to 1 by just dividing everything by 64. And so then I would have x minus 2 squared over 64, and so this number here would be a squared, so a is 8, plus y minus 3 squared over 64, so b is also 8, and if a and b are the same, then it's a circle, equal to 1. And so when we start looking at ellipses and hyperbolas and classifying, this is going to come back in there. But for right now, we're going to see it mostly in this form, and for the examples, I'm going to use this form here. Alright, second example, then we're going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to group together, so I have x squared plus 8x. And I'm going to add my b over 2 squared here. Plus y squared minus 2y plus my b over 2 squared here. I might run out of room. Equals, now this is moving to the other side, so it's become positive, and so then I'm adding the same on the right side as I'm going to add on the left side. So b over 2 here, 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16, so I'm adding 16 to both sides. Right here, my b is negative 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and negative 1 squared is 1. So I'm adding 1 to both sides. And we will factor right here. So a times c is 16, b is 8. So my factors are positive 4 and positive 4. So I have x plus 4 twice. When I factor here, a times c is 1. B is negative 2, so the only thing that'll work here is a negative 1 and a negative 1. So I have y minus 1 twice equals 19 plus 17, which is 36. So my center point here is negative 4, 1. Notice the signs changed on both. And the radius is the square root of 36, or 6. Alright, I'm not going to have you do any decimal ones, but let's go ahead. And set that up. Alright, so right here, my b over 2 squared, and when I have a situation like this, I'm going to leave it as a fraction. So it's going to be 5 over 2 squared, or I could also write that as 25 over 4. And when I add on the other side, I actually will do that. And then here I've got y squared. Notice I've dropped my parentheses. That's just because I have another set there. That's kind of confusing. And then negative 7. So negative 14 divided by 2 is my b over 2. Negative 7 squared means I'm adding 49 here. I guess I can go ahead and put that in there. Equals, so on this side I have a negative 39.25. I'm going to add 25 over 4, which is, if I change that into a decimal, maybe 5 point no, that could have gone, sorry, one more time. 6, which would be 24, and that leaves 10. It's been a long day. 6.22825. 6.25. So I'm adding 6.25 here, and then I'm going to add 49 here. So you get to watch me make mistakes on video just like in class. Alright, now there's a shortcut here, and this is why I went ahead and did this. When you do your factoring, b over 2 will always be what goes in your factors. So when you factor this, it will be x plus 5 over 2 squared. Right there, and y minus 7 squared here. So if you can remember that little shortcut, it'll help you out a whole lot. And then I don't remember off the top of my head what this turns out to be, so let's go calculate that really quickly. So negative 39.25 plus 6 point, what was that? 6.25 plus, oops, too much plus, 49 is 16. Didn't that work out nicely? Okay, so our center then is at a negative 5 over 2, or we could say it's at a negative 2.57, and the radius is at the square root of 16, or 4. Alright, so it's the same process, but there's this little shortcut here that whatever number is in your factors right here happens to be b over 2 every single time. And then let's see. This really is going to be very repetitive, same type of thing right here. So I'm going to skip over that. And then if you have any questions, then email me. Don't worry about foldable right here. You also have the page called Graphing and Properties of Circles. And so on that page there are several problems where you need to state the center and the radius for the circle. There are several problems where you're going to graph. And then there are also, I think, 4 problems where you need to complete the square and show your work on it, and that will be just exactly like what we did right here. After we get through with ellipses, there will be a quiz. There will be open note showing that you can complete the square for each of those. And so make sure that you're showing all of your steps and contact me if you have any questions on that, okay?